Hey church, Pastor Shane here with another community group discussion starter video. This week we are back in the book of Genesis for the series that we've been calling God Meant It for Good, the narrative story of Joseph in the Old Testament in the book of Genesis. And this week we picked up the story where we left off. You remember that Joseph was sold into slavery by his brothers. They were trying to get rid of him. And through a miraculous set of circumstances, God used Joseph to put him in a position of power that when a famine came on the land, he became in charge of all of Egypt and was able to save countless people because God let him know there was going to be 7 years of plenty and 7 years of famine. This week, Joseph is reunited with his brothers, in a sense. He meets them again because everyone is starving because there's a famine land. The brothers come and seek food from Joseph. Joseph tests them because he doesn't know if he could trust them or not. He doesn't know if they're still the same men they were who sold him into slavery and betrayed him, or if their hearts have changed. And what we see here is a really clear message to the original audience of this, which was the people of Israel, and of course to us today, that we need to address our sin. That we need to take our sin seriously and not just look for forgiveness or shove it under the rug, but in addition to seeking forgiveness, to try to make things right, to address our sin, to don't just let it sit in the background and not address it. And we saw three important things in the scriptures that we are walking through. One, that the discipline of God is what drives us to address our sin. We saw God use Joseph a number of ways to kind of confront, make sure that these these brothers were confronted by their past sin. And they attributed the things that were happening to them to God, and attributing the things that were happening to them as a reminder of their past sin. But what we also saw is that they really were changed, that they put on this attitude of submission to God and this attitude of selflessness that helped them deal with their sin issue, that sin problem they had in the past of selling their brother into slavery, whom they assume is long since gone or dead. And so it reminds us too that we need to put on this attitude of submission to God, that yes, to submit to God to how we live our lives and to go back and address past sins and make sure that things are made right. Whether we had an issue of integrity and maybe we need to be honest and open about something we did in the past. And maybe we had a relational problem and we need to go fix that relational issue with someone else and repair our friendship or our family relationship or whatever it might be. Maybe we wronged someone and we need to go make it right. Whatever it might be, we need to put on this attitude of submitting to God's will and submitting to who God is and submitting to his moral standard and submitting to his righteousness. And God desires to do this work in us. And also we want to put on an attitude of selflessness. That's not all about us, that sometimes addressing our sin is to address our sin in a way that benefits someone else, that is looking out for other people just beyond us. And when we do that, when we change our attitude about our sin and really want to confront it and want to submit ourselves to God and kind of put on this attitude of selflessness, then we can address our sin. That's not to say it's easy, but meeting it head on and addressing the problems of our history helps us heal now. It might help us become a more mature believer. It might grow our faith, or it might simply be part of holy living to address those sins of the past, to deal with them so that we could walk upright now the way God has called us to. And when we do that, it often we don't finish the story of Joseph. I guess that's what I should say. We don't know exactly how it ends by the time we get to the end of this. But there is something really encouraging when the brothers, throughout the whole episode, show integrity, when they want to address their past mistakes, when they show that their attitude about life really has changed. They are not the evil brothers that they used to be. They are changed men. The very end of this, it ends with a feast. It says this after they come back to Egypt the second time. Now all the brothers reunited together. It says, then Joseph hurried out, for his compassion grew warm for his brother, and he sought a place to weep. And he entered his chamber and wept there. And then he washed his face and came out. And controlling himself, he said, serve the food. And they served him by himself. And they sat before him, and the firstborn according to his birthright, and the youngest according to his youth. And the men looked at one another in amazement, and portions were taken to them from Joseph's table. But Benjamin's portion was 5 times as many as theirs. And they drank and were merry with him. And it ends with a feast. That makes us think that, you know what, maybe because their attitude is changed, and because Joseph has been walking this whole time in submission to God, that maybe they really can reconcile together. Ending with a feast is a good sign. Anyway, I hope you have a great discussion and talk about our sin and wrestling with it and addressing it and all those things. Have a great week of worship.